We'll start in a few minutes here. Alrighty, can y'all hear me? See my screen?
Yes.
Awesome. All right, so today it's just going to be me. Jeff is taking some much needed time off, so good for him. So what we're going to cover today is budgets and forecasts. So let's just start with a couple notes. What's supported, and then we'll get into the platform itself. So supported metrics, i.e. what types of the different metrics are supported in here. We do have the cost list. So cost list basically peels back the benefits of reservations, spot instances, and custom pricing. So this is a good metric to use with forecasts, especially if a customer is, say, in the process of negotiating a new discount with a vendor, say with AWS, and or they do lots of RI spend. So maybe they buy a 3-year all upfront RI. Using cost lists is going to strip that out, which is it's nice to be able to see a good straight line P times Q, so it's more of a usage type of forecast. So there's some very specific use cases for it, and it works really well with those. So what it does is it excludes reoccurring RI upfront fees, one-time RI upfront fees, and then custom pricing credits. So it strips those out, and it also removes spot instance usage. It supports cash or cost total, one and the same. From kind of best practices, this is a cash view, accounting view is recommended when you want to see what is my cash out the door, right? So we put recommended on there because we're thinking about from a financial standpoint, meaning how many dollars are going to go out the door from my company. So if I do an all upfront RI, I paid for that in January. Well, there's no more dollars going out the door. I'm just now consuming that RI. We do support amortized, and adjusted, amortized, adjusted. So these are all the smoothing out of those costs. Adjusted is actually modified of cash with discounts, but amortized and adjusted amortized are the smoothing out of those RIs over time. Use the service name and usage family as drivers. So we'll see that in a minute here. And then what's the secret sauce? There's a straight line calculation that some people think. Some people think we use AI behind the scenes. What we're using is Monte Carlo methodology. And basically what this does is it uses multiple different scenarios to put together a probable simulation of what the outcome will be. Okay. So what that means is we're using several different variations of service name and usage family to create a more holistic view of what the spend will be. So let's take a look in the platform. So where this lives today is under the plan section. we have current month. So we obviously can't change the date because it's a current month. The cost basis, these are the metrics I was saying is supported. So in this case, we'll just use cash for now. And then everything in here, when you say select a budget, is tied to a view. So think of this as, I want to see all of my production instances, and I'm going to create a budget for all those production instances. In this case, I can come in and we'll see how to create a budget in a few minutes. But I can select it, and in the given month, it's going to maybe give me my estimated spend. So obviously, we're pretty early into the month. So it's just using a couple days of data or a day worth of data. We see how much am I compared to last month. And then this is my budget. So currently it's telling me I am 1 million, estimated to be 1 million under budget, or 4 million total under budget for the year. We come down, we can see my budget line. So this is my estimated. We have the estimate that I mentioned. So right now it's basing it off of one single data point. In combination, with historical, and it does number of days of P times Q, it's estimating out this spend to reach this point. Now, as we come through the month, you'll notice that there's always a gap. So here you see June 1st, and then it always skips the current day because the costs aren't accurate yet. So we'll always see a lag there. Under spending drivers, this is by kind of service and usage family. You can see it, compared to, again, I have a budget, and then, specifically in this one, it's comparing last month to this month. And so I can see, my estimated current for storage will be 579 compared to 562. So if you click on this little delta spend, I prefer this view a little bit nicer because it actually gives me the over under for that same thing. So in this case, for EC2 instance usage, it looks to be a negative 250 for this month, which is great, right? That's what I want to see. And again, as the month progresses along, we're going to see these numbers update, and we're going to get more of an accurate spend for a given month. Down below, we then end up with a breakout of each service and usage family that we're using. You will see other, so it groups, kind of the smaller values together. In this case, it ends up being a fairly large number, but there's a lot of additional services that are comprised in here. So then we end up with a delta. You can see that, negative 250 corresponds to negative 250 right up here. And gives me a good indication of what's going on. Now let's take a look at the forecast. So that was current month. Now I want to put on my hat and say, great, what are my costs going to be for the next, say, 6 months, 12 months? So we have a forecast range. So this is how far out I want to go. Do I want to look more short term, or let's just say I want to go out for 12 months. So this is taking into account the next month and moving forward. And then what am I basing my logic on? So in this case, I think that the last 5 months of my spend is a good indication of what I am going to do for the next 12 months. So this is a conversation piece. We always have to work with a customer and say, do we want to represent the spend we think is most related to what you think it'll be. Sometimes there's a blip, or you end up with seasonal spend. So if it's seasonal, right, we want to make sure we go back 12 months to incorporate the entire 12 months. By default, current month is excluded because, again, we saw that that's a variable. We're 2 days into the month. We don't want to base our numbers off of something that may or may not be accurate. And then by default, credits and one-time charges, we're excluding. Now, again, if a customer thinks that their credits are going to be continual and it's something they want to include, we would just uncheck this and it's going to include it in the math. And then lastly, we covered the budget. So we go through each one of these. We see our 12-month forecast. This is the aggregate of the 12 months. We see that it's going to be quite a bit more than it was previously. And then you'll see sometimes an error in here. And what this indicates is that the range for my budget is not in alignment with the forecast that I created. So you can see my budget ends on January 1st, 2023, but I said extend out this forecast range all the way out to June of 2023. So that's why you're seeing that error. So if I want to fix that, I can just move this back to say, let's go out only 4 months. And then that KPI is going to be filled in for me. There we go. And so based on the forecast range, it looks like I'm going to be spending more than my total budget. So down below, these are again the services breaking out. So this is where I was saying the Monte Carlo. This is how we're getting different variations. So each one of these is essentially taking into account a different spend category for the customer. And this is where it's really nice, methodology, because I might have storage that is growing exponentially, but maybe storage is typically cheap. So maybe even though it's growing exponentially, the total costs aren't growing exponentially. Vice versa, maybe my EC2, compute's always typically the most expensive. If that's growing at a very rapid rate, it's going to cost me a lot of money. So I can click on the details and I can now it's now breaking out each individual service and showing me the graph. So anything that's zero is either truly zero or it's just not encountered in the range itself. So in this case, it's not part of the range. You can see there's the forecast model is 5 months. So I have 5 months worth of data, excluding current month, and then it's continuing out for 4 months. So from here, if I think these numbers look pretty good, and I believe, I've done some validation on here. What I can do is I can say save as a budget. So if I click on save as a budget, it automatically takes all those numbers and it puts the aggregate numbers into a new budget for me. So I can say my new test 22 budget. I can relate it to a view if I want. So this would be if I only want to forecast my AWS, or if I want to do everything in production. So I want to relate it. If I would want to relate to a view, that's where I would do it. I have my start date, how many months out, and then I have my aggregate numbers in here. And then I relate it back to a certain cost basis. And so you always want to remember, whatever cost basis you choose in the budget is what cost basis you want to use when you come in and do the comparison. So once you save it, you end up with each one of these is an individual budget that someone has created. You will see in some instances it is related to a view. So when you are comparing these, the best thing that you can do is select that view for total month. So if I come in back to current month, what I want to do is I want to compare that particular view with that budget, and now I'm getting a more accurate number, of comparison. You can see my numbers changed. The other thing, which is really nice, you'll see the export button. So when you're doing, say, a forecast and you export it, it's going to break out each one of these individually. So this is where, a customer might say, well, you know what, I have a plan that, I'm gonna wipe out my EBS extra storage, archive storage or something. In which case, they can come in, they can make modifications to the plan and then have a new number to be able to create a budget from. All right, any questions?
So I have a question from a customer where they want to include in the budgets a cost allocation that includes like AWS support services. My assumption is that's not available to factor in because I don't think there's a way to do cost allocations through views. So I think, is that pretty much off the table?
Do you mean the cost sharing through the business mappings?
Yeah, I don't think you can reference that right in these budgets.
No.
So then I know in a couple sessions here, we're going to be going over the cost transparency, total cost stuff.
Mhm.
Is that available there where we would be able to enable them with budgeting there?
Yeah, so that's a great segue actually. Let's talk about kind of the limitations and to I'll address your question exactly. So one limitation in here is that each budget is a siloed budget. Meaning I can't reference this budget in this budget. So there's no aggregate budget. If they want an aggregate budget, they have to create a new one that says, this is my aggregate. And then if I change my below budgets for any reason, then I would have to change the aggregate budget as well. So if each one of these is say, $1 estimated, I would then have to go into my aggregate one and change that if I change any of the below ones. To your question as well, the metrics that we have are the metrics that we have in here. So although some of these are very, very powerful, things like cost sharing or post grouped costs, we don't necessarily have that unless we can shove it into a specific particular view. So yes, total cost as well as cloud financial planning. So total cost is a solution today we can implement, which is loading any infinite number of budgets, and we can create roll-ups. That's a much more flexible way of doing it. And then also cloud financial planning. That's on the roadmap. I think it's currently still in design. But what that's going to do is basically build out our IT planning and make it more cloud specific. So that's where you can have a bunch of people come in, enter in their specific spend or estimated spend. You can forecast new projects, etc. But that's I don't know when that's going to come. I just know that it's being worked on.
Kyle, I had a question about cost basis actually.
Yeah.
So let's say obviously you want to use cash as much as possible, but let's say a customer is very heavy in cost list for whatever reason.
Mhm.
I have a customer who's very cost list heavy, but they're focused in I would say like 60% Azure, which I know we don't support cost list for. Would you recommend we just shy away from that then, or is there any effective way we can use Azure with forecasting if they use cost list?
Good question. So cost list, from what I have heard, is going to be released this quarter. And so it's really, really close to being released, which is great. So for now though, yes, Azure is the kind of oddball here. I think my recommendation would be stick to cash because you know what that is. That's not going to change. I have a funny hunch. Anyone who's using cost list for Azure in the budgeting, it's probably going to spike up here as soon as we get that implemented. Which is good because obviously that's going to be more accurate, but it's also going to throw budgets off. So I personally would use something like cash or amortized, based on what they're doing. Amortize is going to give more of that usage, but it's also going to account for RIs.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
The last thing I forgot to cover, so I'm glad you had a few questions, is now what I want to do is say I want an alert. Okay, so I have a particular budget and I want to know when that's going to go over. I want to know when I'm going to go over or under. Sorry, I go into budgets and I can subscribe to one of these. I'm going to add a notification. If there's an associated view with it, I need to select that, as well as associated budget so that we can coordinate, the view and the budget together. And then what's nice here is we can say expected to exceed or exceeded. So, if I am very cash aware and I want to be very, very cautious, I can say anytime I'm getting close, and as soon as the current month model says, oh, you're going to exceed that, I will get a notification. And then also exceeded is pretty self-explanatory, but that's when you actually get a notification when the cost exceeds your budget. And this is a per user. So I can't, come in here and subscribe, Joe to all these budgets. Joe would have to come in and subscribe himself, or I'd have to impersonate and then go through and subscribe.
So Kyle, is there any specific threshold value for that expected to exceed notification?
So that would be, yeah. So if I set my budget, and let this reload here. I set my budget in, that previous screen when I'm setting my my threshold for the month, because all these are month based. So I set my threshold for this month to be 4,095,000. So based on my spend for the month, if all of a sudden I come in and I buy a bunch of EC2 instances, what will happen is this line will all of a sudden spike up, and it's gonna cross my budget for the month to date. And as soon as that happens, that's when I would get that expected to exceed.
Got it. Thanks, Kyle.
All right, any other questions? All right. Well, thank you all. Appreciate you joining. Always ping me if you have any additional questions. Otherwise, we'll see you on Friday.
Thank you, Kyle. Appreciate it.
Thanks all.